দর্শক টাইম টেলিভিশনের ডিসিশন 2014 অনুষ্ঠানে আপনাদের সবাইকে স্বাগতম। আপনারা জানেন যে আগামী মঙ্গলবার অর্থাৎ 4 নভেম্বর যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের মধ্যবর্তী নির্বাচন অনুষ্ঠিত হবে। এই নির্বাচন অনুষ্ঠিত হবে স্টেট এবং ফেডারেল নির্বাচন, যেটা কংগ্রেস নির্বাচন। এই নির্বাচন নিয়ে আমাদের কমিউনিটির মধ্যেও বেশ আগ্রহ আছে। স্টেটের যে নির্বাচন হবে সেখানে স্টেট অ্যাসেম্বলি এবং স্টেট সিনেট, আর যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের কংগ্রেসের যে নির্বাচন হবে সেটা সবাই জানেন। সো এই নির্বাচনে যে কারা জিতবেন এটা এখনও বিভিন্ন ধরনের প্রেডিকশন হচ্ছে। বিশেষ করে যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের যে কংগ্রেস ইলেকশনে যদি যে সিনেটের দু একটা সিটের নির্বাচনে যদি ডেমোক্রেটরা জিতে যান এবং সংখ্যাগরিষ্ঠ হয়ে যান, তাহলে এটা সাংঘাতিক বড় ধরনের ইম্প্যাক্ট সৃষ্টি করতে পারে ইমিগ্রেশন পলিসিতে। কারণ আপনারা জানেন সবাই যে প্রেসিডেন্ট ওবামা এর আগে ইমিগ্রেশনের ব্যাপারে একটি সংস্কার এবং অবৈধদের বৈধতার ব্যাপারে প্রতিশ্রুতি দিয়েছিলেন, এবং এটা কংগ্রেসে বেশ কয়েকবার আসার পরেও কোনো সময় হাউস এবং কোনো সময় সিনেটে গিয়ে এটা বাধাগ্রস্ত হয়েছে। তো আমরা আজকে যে বিষয়টি আলোচনা করব সেটা হচ্ছে যে যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের এই নির্বাচন এবং ইমিগ্রেশনের প্রভাব কী পড়তে পারে। তো আজকে আমাদের সাথে আছেন অ্যাটর্নি মারিজান, যিনি দীর্ঘদিন থেকে যুক্তরাষ্ট্রে ইমিগ্রেশন পেশায় নিয়োজিত। তিনি প্রায় 25 বছর থেকে এখানে ইমিগ্রেশন পেশায় নিয়োজিত রয়েছেন, এবং বাংলাদেশে অনেক ক্লায়েন্ট আছে যারা তার কাছে যায় এবং তিনি তাদেরকে ইমিগ্রেশন বিষয়ে সহায়তা করে থাকেন। তো আমরা আজকে তার সাথে আলোচনা করব যুক্তরাষ্ট্রের এই ডিসিশন 2014 অ্যান্ড ইমিগ্রেশন, এই বিষয়ে উইল ডিসকাস অ্যাবাউট ইট। অ্যান্ড অলসো আমরা জানতে চাইব যে এটার ইম্প্যাক্ট কী হতে পারে। আর অ্যাটর্নি মারিজান তিনি যদিও তিনি একজন ইমিগ্রেন্ট, কিন্তু তিনি নিজে একজন রিপাবলিকান। এই হিসাবে তার কাছ থেকে আরও একটু ব্যতিক্রমিকতা আমরা শুনবো যে হোয়াই হি ইজ রিপাবলিকান ইনস্টেড অফ ডেমোক্রেট। তো এই বিষয় নিয়ে আজকে আলোচনা করব। তো আমরা প্রথমেই উই আর ওয়েলকামিং ইউ to Time Television show, which is a special program, Decision 2014, regarding the election on November 4th.
So thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here with you.
Okay, so you are a Republican, right?
Yes, I'm leaning more towards the Republicans than to the Democrats. I am open-minded. I support any good idea and any good argument, but I'm more leaning towards the Republican Party than the Democratic Party.
So always, most of the people, they thought the immigrant, they are supporter of Democratic Party than Republican. So why you support Republican?
Well, let me tell you, the reason why most immigrants, there are two reasons why most immigrants are more prone to supporting Democratic Party are: number one, because the Democrats have been promising left and right the last 5 to 10 years to do the immigration reform, although that really hasn't happened yet. But they've been promising immigration reform, so it's very logical that these large immigrant communities, particularly Hispanic community or the Latino community, will be in favor of the Democratic Party. And the other thing is that it just appears that way, which is completely wrong, that somehow they can get some handouts, meaning some social programs and social benefits through the Democratic Party more and better than through the Republican. In my view, both is wrong, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I'd like to remind all of your viewers that it was Republican President Reagan which actually had the largest amnesty of the illegal immigrants in the United States. So it is not entirely true that the Republicans are against the immigration reform. Me included, I am in favor of a very smart, comprehensive immigration reform. The other thing about the handouts here, various social services and payments, anything from increase in Medicaid, Medicare, to Social Security benefits and various Social Security income supplements, various types of social help, food stamps and everything else. It's not that Republicans are not compassionate, and George Bush was a couple of times saying, about things about compassionate capitalism and things like this. The issue is that you have to have and particularly our viewers from Bangladesh would know that, you have to have economic basis. You have to have a solid economic basis which you can tax, take that money, and then basically finance all of your social programs. If you don't have good economic basis, if your country is in a total poverty or in a total chaos or overtaxed or full of inflation or something like this, what is basically going to happen? You will not have money to finance all of your programs. So to answer now your question, where do I have a problem with the Democrats? My biggest problem with the Democratic leadership is really on the economic side. I do have a problem with immigration reform. The fact they couldn't make any serious compromise with the Republicans on immigration reform. In my view, we'll talk more about it. They could have done that. There was a window, there was an opportunity. But the biggest problem which I have is really with these huge budget deficits, enormous debt financing and everything else, particularly which President Obama did in the last 6 to 7 years. We speak about the increase in American public debt of about $4 trillion. That would be 4,000 billions for those who don't know what a trillion really means. And we have nothing to show. We have meager economic growth. We are not getting out of poverty. We are actually, most Americans are slipping into the poverty instead of basically rising out. That includes the so-called minorities, which I don't really like to call them that way. I think it's not a good term, but it usually refers to Latino, meaning Hispanic Americans, and to the Black Americans. President Obama really didn't help them. They maybe feel better psychologically because you have somebody who is African American, at least partially, but he is a president of the United States, and I think it's a great thing that he was elected. However, the fact remains, from the economic point of view, that they're actually worse off than they were like 6-7 years ago. So, this is why I have a biggest problem with the Democrats, is really in the economic policy. I'm really much more prone to free market capitalism, deregulation, lower government, lower taxes, smaller government, and not over-regulated economy, basically, and a society that, unfortunately, Democrats, whatever happens, whenever we have a crisis, their answer is like, let's form another institution, let's form another commission, let's add more of the laws, which basically just, add to the regulations and the cost of business.
But thing is, whenever anything came as a law or as a proposal or bills in support of immigrants, then most of the time we found the Republican lawmaker, they opposed it. So what does it mean?
Well, it means that it is perfectly fine to basically propose the law and to try to push it through either the Senate or even propose it in the Congress as well. The issue which I have is that before you even do that, you have to ask yourself a question: do I have a sufficient support from the other side if you really need it? And in this situation, the Democrats would really need it because they control the Senate, and Republicans control the House of Representatives, the so-called Congress. The problem is it realistic? Now, even if it's not realistic, it is perfectly fine. This is just a proposal, as you are correctly saying. So you put that proposal on the table, and you try to basically organize that we negotiate with the other side, or you intend to basically enter into serious negotiations. However, my problem in this whole story, and not once again that I'm accusing Democrats and President Obama doing one thing or another, is that they know very well that yes, there is a significant number of Republicans who are wary of this whole thing, who are basically hard to persuade that this has to be done. And then you basically add insult to the injury by producing the law, which that these people will not vote for, which is still okay as long as you intend to and then engage in a very serious negotiations. But this is what's missing. That never happened. There was no compromise. And I will tell you the most important element of the compromise. As you probably know, Republicans are in favor of the so-called securing the borders first, which means somehow not really closing the borders, but securing that people cannot cross illegally or keep on entering illegally into the United States. That problem can be solved easily. It's a matter of within a month, better border organization, better border control, and everything else.
So if this close the border or secure the border, what does it mean that secure the border?
Well, you're mentioning
what is the difference between secure the border and the close the border.
Exactly. That's what I want to say. These are two different items. These are two different notions. One thing is to close the border. Close the border means no one comes in and out. These are, for me, closed borders. This is impossible, undesirable, unacceptable. No one is advocating this. Absolutely no one is advocating this in the United States, not even because of Ebola virus, speaking of these things. What we are trying to advocate, and this is what I want to tell you, is the controlled border, meaning secured border. What that means is that people will be still normally coming in and out, but only legally. That means either with the American passport, or with a green card, or with a visa issued by the American consulates abroad. That's what I mean, and not jumping the border, getting illegal into the country and things like this. Now, the issue with immigration reform, when you look at it from that point of view, particularly Democratic proposal, it did absolutely nothing about the border control. It would just leave it the way it is. The borders are practically open. Anyone can just swim across the Rio Grande, get in the United States, and then the issue is whether you're caught or not, how lucky you are. Of course, it's a very dangerous venture. You have to go through the deserts. You have to swim the Rio Grande River. You have to do many things, not something similar. You know, there are parts of the Mexican border or the Canadian border where you maybe don't have a rivers. Maybe you have something else. But we speak about a serious desert in Nevada and Arizona that you basically have to go through in order to reach the United States, also the northern Mexico as well. Same goes for Canada, through the forests and mountains, and which are sometimes increasingly dangerous. The issue is that there's no point in the legalization and pursuing the legalization of any number of the so-called illegal aliens. I call them illegal aliens. They can be also called undocumented, but as I indicated once in one of our interviews before, they're really not undocumented. They have documents, but they have documents from their former countries. That's what they have. The idea is really that this should be done at the same time, meaning we secure the borders at the same time when we basically proceed with the legalization. There's no point in legalizing whatever the number of people we have illegal in the United States. Could be 5 million, could be 10, could be 12. I've heard various numbers, and no one really knows because there's no list of these illegal immigrants yet. And there is absolutely no point in legalizing them if the borders continue to be practically open and porous, so that people can just keep on coming. Now, if you do both at the same time, if you basically secure these borders, you get a better border organization, everything else. It also includes the exit control, who's coming in and out of the country with these so-called forms I-94 and everything else, for foreign nationals and everything else. Basically, then there's really no reason and no need to even think whether we need to do the legalization or not. The only other issue about the legalization is, of course, you have other issues like payment of taxes, voting in their local communities, and things like this, which Republicans are very much concerned about. But all of these technical elements can be solved.
So thing is, say about if you in the name of the secure the border, or close the border, whatever. But say about you are talking about the people can come with visa or legal document, right?
Yes.
But if someone have a problem, the U.S. embassy, he's not going to get the visa because of his condition. Might be he's poor guy, or he's politically, disturbed by his opponent. And in order to get from third world country, in order to get a visa, it's very hard to get a visa. So might be someone is not going to get the visa, but his life is in danger. So if he appear in the, if they secure the border, then that kind of people, how they can come and get the benefit of U.S. asylum system or whatever,
That's a very good point, and let me tell you first, my experience with particularly Bangladesh in the last year or two has been extremely positive. A lot of people are coming with the B1, B2 visas. A lot to the point that I have a lot of inquiries how to change the status from a B1, B2 into something else, into work visa, green card, student visa, or something similar. So basically, that's something that I think it's not so much an issue. Now, one of the elements of the immigration reform, which I think should be added in, is the issue exactly what happens with the people like this, who for whatever reason cannot really get visas, but have good political asylum applications. They're really refugees, or who can really present a story which is a good political asylum story. In my view, on every of these borders or border posts or any particular place, there will have to be U.S. Immigration Service stations for those who can arrive there and claim the asylum to the so-called credible, basically fair hearing.
Fear of persecution.
Or well, they call it, credible fear because the law, calls it like, credible fear, and they call it a credible fear hearing, meaning that you actually get questioned about whether you have that credible fear of returning back to your home country, or you're just showing up here at the border because you just want to get into the United States. I think that a compromise in this aspect can be reached, because one of the problems the refugee system really doesn't work. This is yet another issue which has to be reformed. The problem with the refugees is that refugees can only come from outside the United States, into the United States, and they usually organize through the embassies and the consulates. So if the consulate or the embassy doesn't want you as a refugee, you're basically out of luck. Or if you don't have an agency that would do that for you, like be it a Red Cross or Red Crescent or USAID or any of the agencies basically that would organize the refugees, you're virtually out of luck. So this is yet another element which have to be basically reorganized. However, my main point about this today's discussion, and we'll see, we're going to probably speak about the decision 2014 and what happens now with the Congress and the Senate, is that basically there was in the last several years a complete lack of serious discussion and serious compromise. Both sides, and I'm not saying that the Republicans didn't, actually engaged in some sort of a politics. The Democrats very close to the Latino community, hoping to get a support from the Latino community and Hispanic community in order to get immigration reform through, in order to basically get votes. And the Republican community energizing, actually the Republican Party energizing its own community, and very often, unfortunately, right wing of the party as well, basically being anti-immigrant against these people, against the legalization, claiming that they broke the law, they broke the borders, all of these things, which we know that they really did. But the sole reason was for most of them just to actually arrive to the United States and be able to work here. So this is why I have a problem with that.
So talk about the U.S. November 4th election, Tuesday election. If scenario change, say about the Democrat lose the Senate and House both, what could have been the consequence?
Exactly. First, I would like to tell you that the President of the United States has tremendous constitutional and political powers. And this is what probably comes my biggest disappointment with the current president. And this is his lack to seriously engage Republicans in compromise on several of these fields. One of them is the immigration, also energy policy as well, the issues of the environment and the energy policy, and some regulations regarding coal and something like this. It's immigration is only probably one of them, where he was completely uncompromising.
Okay, we are coming back. Just we'll take a short break and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Okay, দর্শক আমরা একটা ছোট্ট বিরতিতে যাচ্ছি, বিরতির পর পরে ফিরবো। টাইম টেলিভিশনের সাথেই থাকুন।
আলাদিনের আরেক ধাপ, বেকারিতে বাজিমাত, স্বাদে গন্ধে বাংলাদেশ, প্রবাস জুড়ে মিলছে বেশ। আলাদিন রেস্টুরেন্ট, 29-06 36th Avenue, Astoria, New York 11106।
দেশে যখন টাকা পাঠাই তখন আমি সোনালী এক্সচেঞ্জ থেকেই পাঠাই। আমিও তাই। সোনালী এক্সচেঞ্জ সরকারি আর্থিক প্রতিষ্ঠান, অর্থ পৌঁছে যায় অতি দ্রুত রাষ্ট্রীয় নিরাপত্তায়। এর মাধ্যমে অর্থ পাঠালে দেশেরও লাভ।
সোনালী ব্যাংকের 1200-রও বেশি শাখায় স্পট ক্যাশ এবং ব্যাংক হিসেবে তাৎক্ষণিকভাবে টাকা পৌঁছে যায়। অন্য যে কোনো ব্যাংকেও টাকা পৌঁছে যায় দ্রুত।
সোনালী এক্সচেঞ্জের অর্থ যায় বৈধ পথে।
সোনালী এক্সচেঞ্জ 20 বছরেরও বেশি সময় ধরে প্রবাসীদের সেবা দিয়ে আসছে।
ডক্টর মোহাম্মদ মফিদ। আমাদের দুটি শাখা আছে, একটি জামাইকাতে, একটি ফুলটন স্ট্রিট। আমরা সব ধরনের দাঁত এবং মাড়ির চিকিৎসা করে থাকি। আপনাদের যে কোনো প্রয়োজনে আমাদের কাছে আসতে পারেন। আপনারা যত্ন সহকারে আন্তরিকতার সাথে আপনাদের সেবা দেবেন।
যখন আপনি বাড়ি কেনা কথা ভাবছেন অথবা বাড়ি রিফাইন্যান্স করতে চান, অমনি মর্গেজ 1996 সাল থেকে বাড়ি ক্রেতার সাহায্য করে আসছে। আজ তাদের ফোন করুন, মর্গেজ এক্সপার্ট সঙ্গে কথা বলুন। তাদের বলুন এসব ডিওর আপনাকে পাঠিয়েছে।
Call Omni Mortgage 516-279-3000.
We were talking about the
Yeah.
দর্শক, আপনাদের আবার স্বাগতম ডিসিশন 2014 অনুষ্ঠানে। তো আমরা আলোচনা করছিলাম আগামী ইলেকশনের যদি রিপাবলিকান পার্টি বিজয়ী হয় তাহলে এর কনসিকুয়েন্স কী হতে পারে ইমিগ্রেশন রিফর্মের ব্যাপারে। সো এই বিষয়টি আলোচনা করছেন অ্যাটর্নি মারিজান, যিনি একজন ইমিগ্রেশন বিষয়ক অ্যাটর্নি। So Mr. Marijan, we are in talk about the election result and what could be the consequence if Republican win in House and Senate both, or Senate, if they got majority in the Senate. So what is your prediction?
Well, first let me answer about the prediction. Based on the polls which I've seen so far and the information that I have, I believe that Republicans will keep the Congress, meaning the lower house of the parliament. America doesn't have a parliament, but it's a House of Representatives.
Yes.
And basically will win the Senate. The way I'm looking at it now, it's of course going to be very close because it's close now anyhow. But it's probably going to be something like 52 to 48 in Senate. There are 100 senators. The American legal system basically has 2 senators from each state. There are 50 states in the United States. So we speak about 100 senators altogether. Right now, I think that Republicans have like 45 or 46, and Democrats have 54 or 55. Depending, you have 1 or 2 independents. So depending sometimes, how they vote. But the way I see it now, Republicans will have 52, which is a solid majority out of basically 148 will be Democrats. There is always a possibility that one will be independent. At least one is running now as independent in Kansas, who looks more like a Democrat, but it's claiming to be an independent. So that's about my predictions. We will see 52-48. We will see how it happens.
So if the Republican, if anything change, then what could be the future of the immigration
well,
reform?
that's a good question. I believe that the answer is probably none on the legislative side, meaning whether there would be any changes in the immigration law. However, I also believe that President Obama will probably, most probably, will actually proceed with his unilateral action, which he was announcing. And as I mentioned before, the President of the United States has huge and enormous political and moral powers. He doesn't have, in the American system of government, President is the chief executive, and he's the one who executes the policies, and he's supposed to execute and implement the laws also. But he has a basically huge maneuvering space regarding proposed changes in the laws, compromises, and then basically also with his unilateral actions. The problem in the unilateral action, just to give an idea to our viewers what that would be, is that if he goes with something that's called executive order, but the president basically goes with an executive order and says, well, I'm now ordering something that would affect a certain class of foreign nationals in the United States. So we speak about the illegal immigrants, illegal aliens. It is really questionable from the legal and constitutional point of view, and in my view, if he goes with a class of people, that's illegal. That's unconstitutional. He cannot really do that without Congress. If he goes with a certain implementation of policies, and if he says until the immigration reform is passed, we will not proceed with so many deportations, or we will only proceed with certain deportations, or we will only do certain things, not the others, providing that this is not contrary to Immigration Nationality Act, which is the law passed by Congress, then probably will survive the court challenges, and it's probably then legal. However, very, very strict reading, I have to tell you, of the American Constitution would really be that a president cannot do that at all, that he cannot go on and legalize the class.
But he tried already, I think.
Well, he tried, I'll
for the executive order.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you one of them. This was 2 years ago when they basically introduced the so-called DACA program. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood, Youth, and Students. So basically,
you are
we have
talking about the
legalization of illegal immigrants who are students and
Dreamer, right?
And exactly. The
Dream
Dream Act didn't pass through the Congress. The Congress didn't really want to pass the Dream Act. What the administration did is that they basically established that program, the so-called deferred action. What the deferred action was is that not that they really could change anything regarding the deportation, because you cannot change it without the Congress. The deferred action only deferred their stay and the action against them in the United States. So they can stay for another 2 years or 4 years or 6 years while they're studying, and also gave them work authorizations, which then immediately enabled them to get social security numbers and to basically get everything else. It somehow made their life easier, and they were able to finish schools, get some scholarships, work while they're going to the school. They were not completely illegal, and maybe get some jobs after the school.
Yes.
But once again, this was only a deferred action. Even that action, because it basically affects a class or a group of citizens, is very problematic, where a president actually had the power to do that, simply because, once again, he, as a chief executive, is charged by the Constitution of the United States by enforcing the laws. He is the basically executive who is supposed to not basically disobey the laws or try to avoid them, but to actually implement them. However, the problem is that the president himself disagrees with the law. He has a different view of it. So he tried to make good to certain groups of these illegal youth and the students, which were really in a very, very difficult situation. This is a generation that basically entered the United States as very young children, grew up in this country, and they grew up without any papers. So they are reaching colleges, they are finishing high schools, they're going to universities, and they don't have a social security number. They don't have anything. Sometimes they don't even have a building ID, so they can't even get into the school. Very difficult situation. So the president did that, and in my view, once again, there should have been a better compromise, and in my view, there was a possibility of compromise with the Republicans. But unfortunately, he didn't want to do that, and we ended up with that program. Now, to answer your question, most probably the Senate will become Republican, and then it's once again going to be the president's decision and the decision of the Democrats. Do we want really immigration reform? And in my view, it's still possible even with the Republican Senate. But what they will have to do, they will have to really secure the borders first. They will have to. And this is one of the issues that I have. There's no point in legalizing 10 million, or doesn't matter how many, if the borders are still basically, I'm not going to say open, but basically porous, that people can keep on coming in and out, as they really wish. Because if you do the legalization now, and the last one we had was April 30, 2001, you're probably going to be in a situation 5 years or 10 years from now that you will have to do another legalization. So obviously this has to be solved in a systematic way. And in my view, the best one will be a compromise of doing both of these at the same time.
So do you think so basically you are telling that this election will not change the present scenario of the immigration, for benefit for the undocumented?
I am very, very pessimistic in that respect. I believe that it will not. I believe that there will be no change. However, we can also still hope that there is a possibility that when President Obama realizes that in the last 2 years of his mandate in the White House, he will be the so-called lame duck. That means somebody, or just a sitting president virtually, with no powers to do anything. Maybe that will push him to the negotiating table. maybe he will be more amenable to go on and sit down with the Republicans and also with the Democrats as well, who also need to participate in that process in order to try to come up with the solutions. I would like to remind you of one American president before who was in that situation. That was President Bill Clinton in the mid-1990s. He found himself, and I don't really remember exactly whether it was 94 or 95, but I think it was 1994. It doesn't really matter. President Clinton found himself in a situation that he was Democratic president and he had a completely Republican, both Congress and the Senate. And then they produced a lot of very, very good legislative pieces. They really produced a lot of very good laws and a lot of very good changes because he was willing to compromise. Yes, in a compromise, you have to give in something. The whole idea of a compromise is almost, and don't take me wrong if I compare it with a marriage, but you have to somehow give in something. And you know, you cannot get everything that you want. You have to basically allow the other side, you know, to get certain points. And
So-
Clinton was really very good with that.
Yeah, so basically the conclusion is the election on November 4th, this Tuesday election, will not change that much. But thing is, if the both House and Senate get compromised, then they can make anything for immigration change.
Yes,
right?
that is true. Once again, I'm very pessimistic about, based on my own political experience and my own observations and analysis of the last 4 to 6 years. We had so many broken promises. We had so many tries. We had so many situations that the headlines in newspapers were full of immigration reform or something like this, and then nothing happened. However, let's not be too pessimistic because, as I'm saying, once the Democrats, and particularly the president himself, realizes that he, for the next 2 years, is facing Republican Congress and Senate, maybe they will be willing to compromise. Maybe they will be willing. And I'm saying this time the price for Democrats will be high to pay because the Republicans, obviously, if they win the Senate, will not only for this, 2 years, most probably that Senate will remain Republican because the American senator is elected for a period of 6 years. It's 6 years.
Yeah.
So most probably will go into another president 4 years or 6 years from now.
Yeah.
We are going to continue speaking about it. So I believe without serious compromise, this will not be able to get done.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marijan. Thank you so much for coming here. দর্শক এ পর্যন্ত আজকের এই ডিসিশন 2014 অনুষ্ঠানে মিস্টার মারিজান কথা বললেন ইমিগ্রেশন এবং নির্বাচন এই বিষয়ের উপর যে মঙ্গলবারের নির্বাচন এই নির্বাচনে যদি কোনো ধরনের পরিবর্তন হয় তাহলে এটা ইমিগ্রেশনে কী প্রভাব ফেলতে পারে। তো যাই হোক, আপনারা এ পর্যন্তই আজকে আপনারা টাইম টেলিভিশনের সাথে থাকার জন্য আপনাদের সবাইকে অভিনন্দন এবং কৃতজ্ঞতা। আমরা আবার ফিরে আসব এ ধরনের অনুষ্ঠানে ভবিষ্যতে। আপনারা সবাই ভালো থাকুন, সুন্দর থাকুন, সুস্থ থাকুন এবং টাইম টেলিভিশনের সাথেই থাকুন। খোদা হাফেজ।
Thank you.